If you were— "The key! I don't want to hurt you." Bartok lunged. Jane turned and ran, slamming the door behind her. It clanged and echoed. The echo didn't stop. Bartok, on the point of opening the door and sprinting down the companionway after her, stopped. It wasn't the echo of metal slamming against metal. It was the radar warning. Either Mozart's lady was within dangerous proximity of a meteor, or a ship was following them. Bartok ran to the radar screen. The pip was unmistakable. A ship was following them. A ship as fast, or faster, than Mozart's lady. Cursing, Bartok did things with the controls. Mozart's lady, already straining, increased its speed. Acceleration flung Bartok back in the pilot's chair. Pluto loomed dead ahead. Johnny Mayhem knew at what precise moment he had been discovered, for suddenly the speed of Mozart's lady increased. Since this had occurred an hour and a half after Mayhem had first got a clear pip of the bigger ship on his radar, it meant he'd been spotted. Prone, with his hand stretched forward in the coffin-like experimental ship, Mayhem worked the controls, exactly matching speed with Mozart's lady. He tried to put himself in the position of the escaped convict. What would he do? His best bet would be to swing in close around Pluto, as close as he dared. Then, on the dark side of the planet, to change his orbit abruptly and come loose of its gravitational field in a new direction. It was a dangerous maneuver, but since the escaped convict now knew for sure that the tiny ship could match the speed of the Mozart's lady, it was his only hope. The danger was grave. Even a first-rate pilot would try it only as a last resort, for the gravitational pull of Pluto might upset Mozart's lady's orbit. If that happened, the best the convict could hope for was an emergency landing. More likely, a death crash would result. Seconds later, Mayhem's thinking was confirmed. Mozart's lady executed a sharp turn in space and disappeared behind the white bulk of Pluto. Mayhem swore and followed. "He's trying to kill us all! He doesn't know how to pilot a ship! We're helpless! Helpless! Do something, Mrs. Moriarty! Now, girls, whatever happens, you must keep calm. We can only assume that Jane is right about what she saw, but since none of us can pilot a spaceship, we'll have to bide our time." "Bide our time? We're all as good as dead!" One of the girls began screaming. Mrs. Moriarty slapped her. "I'm sorry, dear. I had to hit you. Your behavior bordered on the hysterical, and if we become hysterical, we are lost. Lost, do you understand?" "Yes'm." "Good. Then we wait and see what happens." What was happening was an attempt at what test pilots term planet swinging. Moving in the direction of Pluto's orbit, Mozart's lady swung in very close behind the planet. Then, as the rotation of Pluto on its axis hurled it forth again, as a slingshot hurls a pellet, Mozart's lady's rockets would alter the expected direction of flight. Unless a pursuing ship followed exactly the same maneuver, it would be flung off into space at top speed in the wrong direction. It might be hours before the first ship's trail could be picked up again, if ever. House Bartok, aware of all this, and one other factor, sat sweating it out at the controls. The one other factor was closeness to Pluto. For if you got too close, and the difference was only a matter of miles covered in an elapsed time of milliseconds, Pluto might drag you into a landing orbit. If that happened, traveling at tremendous speed, there'd be the double danger of overheating in the planet's atmosphere and coming down too hard. Either way, the results could be fatal. His hands sweating, Bartok struggled with the controls. Now already he could see Pluto bulking, its night side black and mysterious, in the viewport. Now he could hear the faint shrill scream of its atmosphere. Now, trying to time it perfectly, he slammed on full power. A fraction of a millisecond too late. Mozart's lady stood for an instant on its tail, shuddering as if it were going to come apart and rain meteoric dust over Pluto's surface. That had happened too in such a maneuver, but it didn't happen now. Instead, Mozart's lady went into a landing orbit. But its speed was still terrific, and, lowering, it whizzed twice around Pluto's 15,000-mile circumference in 20 minutes. Atmosphere screamed, and the heat siren shrilled, and a cursing House Bartok applied the braking rockets as fast as he could. Pluto's surface blurred in the viewport, coming closer at dizzying speed. Bartok stood Mozart's lady on its tail a second time, this time on purpose. The ship shuddered and struck Pluto. Bartok blacked out. When Mayhem's radar screen informed him that Mozart's lady had failed to break free of Pluto's field of gravity, Mayhem immediately went to work. First, he allowed the tiny scout ship to complete its planet swing successfully. Then he slowed down, turned around in deep space, and came back, scanning Pluto with radar scopes and telescope until he located the bigger ship. That might have taken hours or days ordinarily, but having seen Mozart's lady go in, and having recorded its position via radar, Mayhem had a pretty good idea as to the landing orbit it would follow. It took him 3/4 of an hour to locate the bigger ship. When he finally had located it, he brought it into close-up with the more powerful of the 2 telescopes aboard the Scout. Mozart's lady lay on its side in a snow tundra. It had been damaged, but not severely. Part of the visible side was caved in, but the ship had not fallen apart. Still, chances were that, without extensive repairs, it would not be able to leave Pluto. There was no way, Mayhem knew, of making extensive repairs on Pluto. Mozart's lady was there to stay. The safe thing to do would be to inform Neptune and wait in space until the police cruisers came for House Bartok. The alternative was to planetfall near Mozart's lady, take the convict into custody, and then notify Neptune. If Bartok were alone, the choice would have been an easy one. But Bartok was not alone. He had 100 girls with him. He was desperate. He might try anything. Mayhem had to go down after him. The trouble was, though, that of all the worlds in the galaxy, not merely in Sol's system, Pluto was the one most dangerous to Johnny Mayhem. He had been pursuing House Bartok for 3 days, which meant he had 2 days left before it was imperative that he leave his current body. This would mean notifying the hub of the galaxy by subspace radio to pull out his elan, but Pluto's heaviside layer was the strongest in the solar system, so strong that subspace radio couldn't penetrate it. And that was not the only thing wrong with Pluto. It was, in fact, an incredible anomaly of a world. Almost 4 billion miles from the sun at its widest swing, it still was not too cold to support life. Apparently, radioactive heat in its core kept it warm. It even had an Earth-type atmosphere, although the oxygen content was somewhat too rich and apt to make you giddy. And it was a slow world. Time moved slowly on Pluto, too slowly. When you first landed, according to the few explorers who had attempted it, the native fauna seemed like statues. Their movement was too slow for the eye to register. That was lucky, for the fauna tended to be enormous and deadly. But after a while, how long a while Mayhem didn't know, the fauna, subjectively, seemed to speed up. The animals commenced moving slowly, then a bit faster, then normally. That, Mayhem knew, was entirely subjective. The animals of Pluto were not changing their rate of living. The visitor to Pluto was slowing down to match their laggard pace. 2 days, thought Mayhem. That was all he had.